G'day, Rockhound here. It's been just over a month since my last video, and in that time there's been quite a lot of news about Mavericks Proving Grounds testing phase known as the Forge. Let's take a look at the key info that's come out about the game, including some interesting innovations in the Battle Royale genre that the game's developer Automaton have just announced. Firstly, early to mid-December saw what I think is a positive shift in the way that Automaton is conducting their marketing, and that almost certainly is a result of Chris Tynan joining the studio as their marketing manager in late November. The changes have resulted in more content coming out, more interaction with the community, and information being delivered in a clearer manner. This change is perhaps most evident in Automaton's response to a blog post that was written by one of the community members, Sorrowy. Now, he's put a huge amount of time into playing the Forge and providing valuable feedback to the team. Sorrowy's post was published by Automaton on their website a day or two ago, and the post was a series of questions that Sorrowy answered, with the last question being, what do you think Automaton could do better? Could be to do with Mavericks or something else, e.g. community management, etc. Sorrowy answered that the main things currently would be explaining what the studio is working on and why they're focusing on a certain aspect rather than something else. They should also give an ETA on when we can expect specific bugs to be fixed, e.g. the known bugs, and when they're expected to be fixed, or are they working on it. Sorrowy also asked a few of the Mavericks community the same question, and most of them said they'd like to see Automaton using all the communication channels rather than focusing on a single outlet. He also added a comment that I made to him while he was writing the post, which is that I'd like to see their marketing language made more plain for a while, like the next couple of months. Giving straight up facts and no spin might sway a few players who have stepped away to come back to the game. If you haven't followed the game closely until now, delays in the start dates for Founders Access, as well as the change from a classic closed beta to the Forge, saw many founders being pretty unhappy with Automaton, and I think it would be fair to say that most of the community would like to see better communication from the studio. Now, Automaton responded to these comments by writing that following this feedback, they will be changing and clarifying their approach to communication for the next few months. Firstly, they're going to create a public-facing Trello-based Kanban dashboard, which will allow us to jump in and see the status of all bugs that are currently being worked on. This style of dashboard should provide us with a quick overview of what's being worked on as well as what's been completed. The devs will share the link to this in the next few weeks before the first core update. I think this is a great idea because it really gives a level of transparency that we haven't seen so far from the studio, and it means that we can jump in at any time and just get an idea of what's being worked on to try and improve the game. With regard to their communication channels, community members can expect an active presence from the devs during UK work hours on the Mavericks forum and Discord. So between 8 AM and 6 PM Greenwich Mean Time, Monday to Friday, at least one of the community management team will be based on those channels to actively respond to queries, questions, comments and feedback. They've said that they see the forum and Discord as offering the best space for the dev team to talk to founders, who they consider to be the most important people at this stage in the game's development. They intend to post there regularly, engage community members in conversation, and make these two spaces the main hub for talking with the community. Automaton have also decided that they will keep a less active presence on Facebook and Twitter, and by less active they mean that the studio will keep these spaces open and will share larger news, for instance blog updates, events the studio is attending, updates regarding public releases, etc. They've also decided not to actively participate on Reddit anymore, and that at this moment the platform really isn't a priority for the studio. Instead, they'll just monitor the subreddit occasionally for any infringing material. For YouTube, they're going to employ the same approach as Reddit with regards to not really responding to the community there. They still plan to share video content on YouTube to make it easier for the community, and they'll also be hosting live streams and plan to broadcast those videos via YouTube, during which time they'll actually respond to comments then. While some of these changes might appear to be Automaton interacting less with the community, it's actually more that they're just clarifying where they will interact, which makes sense as the forums and Discord are by far the most active channels for discussion at the moment, especially when compared to YouTube and Reddit. As far as my comment about them making their communication style more plain, they acknowledge that they should have actually done this sooner, and that by employing the changes of communication that I've just mentioned, they feel that they will be less prone to spin announcements. Now, they intend to make information for the next few months much more black and white, and as they near the public launch, they'll review that approach again to ensure that it works best for a wider audience who will grow interested in the game. So I think this is all really great stuff from the devs, and it's a shame that it didn't happen right from the start. Now, there will still be members of the community who will continue to feel burned by the delays in Founders Access and changes regarding the Forge. I can understand that. However, for the sake of providing us with a game that is great and that people are interested in, I think these changes are actually going to provide those of us who have chosen to continue our interest in the game and those who will come to the game in the future the level of communication and interaction we hope to see all along. And in the end, this just means we can get on with the business of looking forward to the game hopefully developing into something awesome. And perhaps some of those people who have stepped away from the game might come back and take a look at it again in a few months when the game is free to play. Now, as far as news about the game goes, James Thompson, Automaton's CEO, held an AMA in mid-December in which there were a few key bits of info. Firstly, when answering a question about how the Battle Royale part of the game will work, James mentioned that the deployment hall will have what he described as a drop pool in it. And this image of the deployment hall that we were first shown back in August last year suggests that these short planks that actually look like gangplanks on a pirate ship may pretty much be that, and that deployment will somehow involve you jumping into the pool. How that results in you landing somewhere on the Isle of Dern is currently a complete mystery. In addition, the recent post about innovations to Battle Royale gameplay included a comment about being able to gather information about the world from the deployment pool, which sounds like something out of the movie Minority Report, but I guess we can only be patient for more info about this. James also talked about how the Isle of Dern is currently quite barren in the Forge, but that this will change quite quickly over time as they've designed new tech that allows them to make rapid updates to the environment. With regard to objectives in the game, James confirmed that there will be some type of airdrop, but that there'll also be task-based objectives like having to capture and hold an area on the map for a set period of time, for instance. He also talked about a new UI being introduced, and I'll take a close look at a draft version of that later in the video. James also talked a little bit about why they changed from a traditional closed beta, which they announced at E3 in June last year, to the Forge, and you can hear his comments here.
Just to repeat, why are we bringing people in early in the AAA game dev cycle? As you may know, typically AAA games take 3 years to develop, and we're 1 year into the development of Mavericks. We talked about this a lot, and we announced a beta at E3, and which we didn't end up releasing. And it came down to this: like, we could polish certain aspects of Mavericks and give you a game. But if we did that, the way you get from that game that's more polished, more finished, but only a slice of the experience into everything we want to do with Mavericks is not so clear, you know, and that's how you kind of get stuck in a rabbit hole. But, you know, we were quite ambitious with Mavericks and we really want to deliver on the vision. And fundamentally the way we do that is by building out a lot of new platform tech and such. Because we're doing this new stuff, it fundamentally needs players in from an early stage. We did pivot our approach, and that meant that, you know, there are some lessons we've learned that mean that we could approach the Forge launch better. But we are confident that bringing players in early is definitely the best thing for developing these complex new online games. Fundamentally, no matter how much we test internally, like, we cannot, you know, really work out the dynamics of the game. It is in a very early stage right now, but kind of we do have a core community who are really helping us out. We've already got a lot of very useful feedback. Fundamentally, when you're dealing with a complex multiplayer game like this, and so much new technology, while there are always in theory ways that you can kind of make individual tests and bring them all together, unless we have a core community and a need to rapidly iterate each week, really it's easy to lose kind of perspective. And, you know, there are so many different ways this game can go. We focus entirely on developing the right infrastructure here to update the game regularly and understand what players are doing in the game. So as a result of that, we ended up with the Forge as it is today. I think that if you look in a small number of weeks' time, then perhaps it would feel a little bit more like you'd expect if you're kind of expecting more like a beta. Like, we are putting in content relatively quickly, but the reality is these first few weeks are a combination of our need to kind of pivot the approach of Mavericks, and also the fact that it's much more efficient for us to ask for the core founders' help now. We'll just get the game to everyone faster.
Now, that's probably the clearest explanation we've had to date of why we didn't get a traditional closed beta, and it's just a shame that something more like that explanation wasn't included in the communications when the change of plans was first made. Anyhow, as far as the development of the Forge goes, James said that we should expect core updates to happen every couple of months, and that public early access will probably happen around the middle of 2019, but that is subject to confirmation. Around the same time as James' AMA, we had a data report from the Forge published. The most interesting info in that was the popularity of the factions, as shown by the tally of capital reputation credits that have been cached, with the Circle of Lazarus and the Syndicate being the clear leaders, followed by my own choice of faction, the Institute of Technological Resistance, and the last Special Forces following their name by being a distant last. A week before Christmas, Automaton gave us info about the first core update, known as Hunter and Hunted, which we learned just recently will launch in February, with the devs also saying that January is really the final month of just testing the core tech for the game. The devs have also added that going forward, both core and rapid updates will change from occurring on a Thursday to a Tuesday. Now, Hunter and Hunted will see the introduction of tracking, which will include players being able to see discarded magazines from weapons and used bandages lying where opponents have left them, as well as footprints that will allow you to follow others across the island. Destruction will also come into play, with explosive gas bottles being added, as seen in this early gameplay video. Now, these will allow you to take others out with a carefully placed shot, even if you can't see them directly. Alongside that, fire propagation will be added, meaning that the fire you start by shooting a gas bottle might actually spread and take out other players who are nearby. Armor will be introduced too, and in my interview with Lawrence Barnett last month, he talked about to what degree the 3 levels of armor will effectively increase your health points.
Some very rough ballpark figures. I'd expect our tier 1 to maybe provide 10 to 30% damage reduction. Our tier 2 continuing at sort of these 20%, so then it would be 30 to 50, and then maybe our rarest star in the armor in the game just tops that out, somewhere between 50 and 70% additional health. Obviously not through the health system.
Those armor details all seem pretty normal to me, and it's definitely something that the community will be able to give plenty of feedback on. Now, a weight system will also be added in this update, although we know little about this at this stage. So it's unclear whether it just means that there's going to be a limit to the number of slots that you can put gear into, or whether your movement will actually be affected by how much gear you carry. Either way, I'd like to see this system being kept relatively simple and not forcing players to spend too much time organising their inventory. Perhaps having your top speed incrementally slowed once you go over 100% capacity for your backpack, but allowing you to carry, say, up to 120% capacity at the expense of moving maybe half as fast. Or something like that, I think would be a good way to go. Now, we might have some indication that a similar system to that might be used, because as I mentioned earlier, the Hunter and Hunted update will also include a new UI, and a draft version of that can be seen in this short piece of video that was embedded in the article about the update. Being a draft version, this is likely to see some changes, but let's take a close look at what is shown, starting with that inventory info. On the right, we see the backpack indicator with a percentage full amount, which could relate to the weight system I suggested before. Above that, we see the remaining durability of the armor and helmet, which is clear and easy to read. However, I don't like the location of these indicators, as I'd really prefer not to see anything blocking my view at the horizon level of the screen, because I'm going to be scanning for enemies left and right there most of the time when I'm moving through the landscape. And the same applies with the chat box on the left hand side. I prefer to see that pushed upwards. Back on the right we have the kill feed, which is fine, and then the number of remaining players, which doesn't match the number shown here, but that's probably just because this is a mock-up UI. To the right of that we have the number of kills that have been made, and then the time remaining. Now if that time shown is to let us know when the circle closes, my preference would actually be to have that shown next to the mini-map on the bottom left of the screen, as I may be glancing at that when the circle is nearby, or if I want to know which direction the next circle is. Moving up to the top, the updated compass looks really good. It's clean and simple, although perhaps it could be a little less wide, and that might actually allow some room for the chat box on the top left as well. The squad health indicators are probably too big, and that just needs to be readable and nothing more. The mic button indicator just needs to go completely. Learn what the keybind is and remember it, you don't need to see it on the UI. The chat box needs to move up, as I've already mentioned. Then the mini map at the lower left is probably not a final version, as this one looks a bit too cartoon-like. I would actually prefer to see a mini map that is much more like a topographic map if possible. The health indicator number could be smaller, and on the end of the health bar I'd prefer to push things away from the center of the screen where possible, so it frees up as much viewing space as you can. And on the bottom right, the weapon indicators are likely to change. I would guess this is because the previous ones we've seen with the weapons rotating around a dial actually look pretty good in my opinion. Now, one of the main reasons that this UI video was actually shown to us was so that we could see the damage direction indicator, which is shown as a sort of see-through blood color that rotates depending on which direction you face. Damage direction indicators are certainly going to be a point of contention. I've already seen comments in the Discord that are negative about what's shown here, and those people said that they just prefer to rely on sound to find where you're being shot from. I'm on the fence with this one, as coming from Battlefield, a damage direction indicator is invaluable in that game because there's too much gunfire going on to rely on sound alone. However, I think what might be best in this case is to actually test it, just see how the community reacts to it. It can always be dropped if too many people think that it lowers the level of realism too much. I'll be following the community's reaction closely to it and will let you know what the feedback is. In addition to the UI update, the devs plan to continue refining gunplay as well as providing the first few attachments, such as extended magazines, suppressors and red dot sights. We should also see the environment become more elaborate with rivers and streams being added, although it wasn't clear if that would be coming in the Hunter and Hunted update. At the same time as the Hunter and Hunted at Core update happens, we're likely to see the 100,000 players who signed up to play the game at E3 being allowed access to the game. So we should expect significant numbers in the servers around that time. Okay, lastly, Automaton have just announced in a blog post that they are going to make some innovations to how Battle Royale will occur in Mavericks. In a nutshell, the game will be split evenly into two parts, each of which lasts about half an hour. The first half is known as the exploration phase, and this allows you to enter the open world as many times as you like, allowing you to loot, kill other players, and set up traps, as well as gain some info about what's happening around the map. This will likely lead to some interesting and unexpected tactics being used by players in preparation for the second half of the game, which is known as the survival phase and is essentially a normal battle royale. Now, this split means that there will be no waiting times to jump into a game, and if you prefer just to play the battle royale part, then you can just join a game which is closest to entering the survival phase, as the servers are likely to have staggered starting times. Additionally, at any point in the game, players can call in their companion drone to extract gear and weaponry. However, as you see in these concept art images that accompanied the article, which incidentally are some of the only images we have of what the drones might look like, setting up your drone to come in requires your location to be clearly marked for everyone to see by a beam of light pointing skyward. This will make for a nervous few moments as you guard your location, waiting for the drone to arrive. If successful, your banked gear can be traded in for in-game currency or swapped for other items with other players. Automaton see this innovation as leading to each Battle Royale match being unique as players interact with the world leading up to the start of the session. Now, I was really pleased to read about this proposal because I think the concept of Battle Royale is well due for some fresh ideas, with there being little major innovations since PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds pushed the BR game mode to the top of the pile almost 2 years ago. I'm sure there will be people that view the rules of a Battle Royale as being somewhat sacrosanct, however, keeping that process completely unchanged can also lead to a stagnation of a concept. And in the end, if you're that type of person, there are plenty of options available for more traditional Battle Royales. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the split game mode adds to the genre, and it'll be interesting to see what the community's feedback is too. Okay, well that wraps up this quite lengthy update of everything that's happened in the Mavericks world over the last month or so. After a bit of a break over Christmas and New Year, I'm looking forward to creating new videos about Mavericks Proving Grounds as often as I can, and also the opportunity to create more content once the NDA is lifted and I can show you some gameplay. Now, if you found this video helpful, please consider leaving a like or a dislike if you didn't. It all helps. And if you'd like to see more Mavericks content from me, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.
It's just the night.